In this video, we're going to introduce ratios. So the first thing we need to do is take a look at what a ratio is. So a ratio is a comparison or relationship between two quantities. It can be written in three different ways. One of those ways is in words. So I would be using the word to show that relationship or that comparison. Or it can be written using a colon. So in this case, it's these two dots that are the colon. And so again, I'm representing dogs to the number of cats that I have. And then the last way I could write it is as a fraction. So again, this fraction line is representing that comparison. So I'm comparing the number of dogs to the number of cats that I have. And the order in which I write a ratio is always very important to the meaning. So let's take a look at that meaning of ratios. So in this first one, I'm going to look at circles to squares. That means my circles is going to be my first number, and my squares would be my second number. On the other side here, it says comparing squares to circles. So I'm still comparing the same thing, but my order is different. So this time, my squares are going to be first, and my circles are going to be second. So when I look at this comparison, I have 3 to 4. So again, up here I have 1, 2, 3 circles, and in this one, my circles are first, so there's my 3. In this one, my circles are second, so there's my 3. And then squares are second over here. And again, I have 1, 2, 3, 4 squares. So my 4 is second here. Here, my squares are first. So that means my 4 is first. I can also write this ratio as or using a colon. So again, it's 3 to 4 when I'm comparing circles to squares, or it is 4 to 3 when I'm comparing squares to circles. And the same thing with a fraction. 3 circles to 4 squares. Or over here I have 4 squares to 3 circles. So the order is very important. And the order is always set up in the way that it is in the question. So let's take a look at some of that. So first I have colored in circles to non-colored in circles. So the first side I have here is colored in circles. So when I count, I have 1, 2, 3, 4. So 4 colored in circles, and they're using the word to. So I'm going to use the word to. Non-colored in circles. So here I have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. So non-colored in circles would be 6. So my ratio is 4 to 6, or 4 colored in circles to 6 non-colored in circles. Here I have circles. So I'm going to count 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. So I have 10 circles, and they're using a colon. And I'm looking at squares. So now I have 1, 2, 3, 4 squares. So my ratio is 10 to 4, or 10 circles to 4 squares. Down here in this statement, it says for every blank non-colored in squares, there are blank colored in squares. So first of all, I'm going to look at my non-colored in squares, which would be 1, 2. And my colored in squares would be 1, 2. So it says then for every 2 non-colored in squares, there are 2 colored in squares. So let's take a look at this last one here. I have colored in squares, which would give me 1, 2, and they're using a colon, so I have a colon. And then it says colored in circles. So I have 1, 2, 3, 4. And so my ratio is 2 to 4, or 2 colored in squares to 4 colored in circles. Now, if we look at this situation here, it says a restaurant worker uses 5 loaves of wheat bread and 2 loaves of rye bread to make sandwiches for an event. The first one says write a ratio that compares the number of loaves of rye bread to the number of loaves of wheat bread. So again, loaves of rye bread are first. And so I come up here. Here's my loaves of rye bread. So that would be 2. And then 2, the number loaves of wheat bread. So here's my loaves of wheat bread, which would be 5. So my ratio would be 2 to 5. Now here it says describe the ratio of 7 to 2, and what does that mean in terms of loaves of bread used in the event? Well, I know that the 2 represents my loaves of rye bread. So it'd be 2 loaves of rye bread. And that's, like we said, that 2 right there. But then the 7, we don't see that in our problem anywhere. But if you notice, I have 2 loaves of rye bread and 5 loaves of wheat bread. So that would mean that I have 7 total loaves. So the 7 up here represents the total amount of loaves of bread that I have because I'm taking my 2 plus my 5 gives me that total of 7. So with that being said, there are 2 different types of ratios. One of them is called a part to part ratio. And when we look at a part to part ratio, that is when we are comparing one part to another part. So in our previous problem, that is when we were comparing the 2 different types of loaves of bread together. And then if I look here, here's kind of a picture. A part to part would say that I have 4 green triangles to 6 purple triangles. They each make up together the whole thing, but the 4 green triangles are apart, the 6 purple triangles are a part. The other type of ratio is a part to whole. And a part to whole is comparing one part to the whole or the total. So, like we said in the previous problem, I was comparing the number of rye bread loaves to the total amount of loaves that I had altogether. Again, a picture would be like this part to whole. I have 4 green triangles, which is my part, because it only makes up a little part of the whole picture. But I have 10 total triangles because when I divide that up into triangles, I get 10 of them. So that would be my whole amount. So let's kind of use these 2 ratios to compare baseballs and soccer balls. So if I look at part to part, I can have 5 soccer balls, or excuse me, 5 baseballs to 3 soccer balls because baseballs is a part of the whole group and soccer balls is a part of the whole group. I can have 3 soccer balls to 5 baseballs because, again, soccer balls is a part of the whole group and baseballs is a part of the whole group. Or I can look at my part to whole over here and I can have 5 baseballs, which is a part of the whole thing, or I can have 8 sports balls, which would be the total amount of things I have in my whole group. Or I can have 3 soccer balls to 8 sports balls because again, I have 3 soccer balls, which is a just a small piece of the whole group, or I have 8 sports balls, which makes up my whole entire group. So understanding this idea of part to part and part to whole, when I look at a fraction would be an example of a part to whole ratio. Because when I look at a fraction, the fraction that's colored in here would be 1/3. So 1 part is green, and there are three whole pieces in my circle. So a fraction again is represents a part to whole ratio.